Imagine spending like 5 hours a week just sweating through these intense boot camps. You're
Mhm.
meticulously restricting your calories and doing exactly what the fitness magazines and social media influencers tell you to do,
Right.
only to discover a year later that your bone density is plummeting, your joints ache constantly, and you are actively losing muscle mass.
Yeah, it's brutal.
For millions of women, that isn't some worst-case nightmare scenario. It's just Tuesday. I mean, they are working incredibly hard, but they are operating off a biological blueprint that just wasn't designed for them.
Exactly.
So, we've covered how your hormones shape your training and how your body evolves across your athletic lifetime. Now we get into the how. What does a training week actually look like for a female athlete, and how does that change depending on where you are hormonally?
That is, well, that's exactly the bridge we need to cross today.
Mhm.
Because we're taking all that theory, all the complex endocrinology and that underlying biology we've unpacked over this series, and we're translating it directly to the gym floor, the track, and, the kitchen. Because the days of just guessing and hoping for the best are over.
And honestly, it's about time. Because for decades, the fitness industry treated women like small men with the exact same biology. Trying to run a female athlete's body on a male training protocol is like trying to run iOS software on an Android phone. It might sort of work for a while, but eventually the system crashes.
Oh, wow. That is the perfect way to visualize it. Because the operating systems are fundamentally, like, on a cellular level, they're different.
Right.
The hormonal environment that dictates how you recover from a workout, how you synthesize new muscle tissue, or even how you metabolize systemic stress, it's entirely unique to female physiology.
Totally.
When you apply male data, which, assumes the stable daily infusion of testosterone, to a female body that runs on these fluctuating cycles of estrogen and progesterone, the resulting crash isn't just a plateau in performance.
It's way worse than that.
Yeah, it manifests as chronic injury, metabolic slowing, and just, well, severe burnout.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. Today's goal is pure execution. We are taking a massive stack of incredible female-specific sports science sources,
Good stuff.
including brand new systematic reviews from 2024 and 2026, major research out of the German Sport University Cologne, and the groundbreaking work of experts like Dr. Stacy Sims, Dr. Ripfa McConan, and Dr. Anthony Hackney. We are taking all of that and turning it into a practical, actionable blueprint for you, tailored to whatever hormonal stage you're in right now.
Right, because, you shouldn't need a PhD in endocrinology or exercise physiology just to figure out how to structure your training week. The science is complex, sure, but the application needs to be clear, it needs to be adaptive, and it needs to be empowering.
Okay, let's unpack this. Since we are moving away from that small men paradigm, we really have to start with the most misunderstood pillar of female fitness, which is strength training.
Oh, absolutely.
For so long, the message to women was basically, grab the pink dumbbells, do 20 reps so you get toned, but not bulky, and then spend 45 minutes on the elliptical.
Ugh, the pink dumbbells, right.
But looking at the 2026 Walter Edel systematic review from the German Sport University Cologne, which look exclusively at postmenopausal women, by the way, and the 2024 Mekonnen systematic review looking at healthy adult females, the consensus is loud and clear. Strength training is absolute medicine. It is not an optional add-on.
It really is the non-negotiable foundation of the entire system. And when we use the word medicine, we aren't using it as a cute metaphor.
No.
We mean it in a very literal, measurable, physiological sense. Strength training consistently improves body composition, muscle strength, and bone mineral density in women across all menopausal stages.
It's incredible.
It's basically the single most effective intervention we have to counteract the natural physiological declines that happen as we age, particularly as estrogen drops.
So let's dig into that estrogen connection for a second, because I think a lot of people just view estrogen as like the reproductive hormone. What is it actually doing in the muscles and bones?
That's a huge misconception, actually. Estrogen is heavily involved in muscle stem cell activation and bone maintenance. So in your bones, there is this constant remodeling process happening.
Okay.
You have cells called osteoclasts that break down old bone and cells called osteoblasts that build new bone.
Got it. Osteoclasts crash, osteoblasts build.
Exactly. When you have robust estrogen levels, estrogen acts like a supervisor, keeping the osteoclasts in check so they don't break down too much bone. But as estrogen declines, especially in perimenopause and postmenopause, That supervisor basically leaves the building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the osteoclasts start working overtime, breaking down bone faster than your body can rebuild it. So your natural protective shield is just gone.
So if the chemical supervisor is gone, we basically have to find a mechanical way to tell the bones to stay strong.
Precisely. Heavy resistance training essentially steps in to replace that shield through a mechanism called Wolff's Law.
Wolff's Law.
Yeah. Wolff's Law basically states that bone in a healthy person will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. If you put a heavy barbell on your back, that physical stress causes microscopic bending in the bone.
Wait, actual bending?
Yes, very microscopic, but yes. The bone tissue senses that mechanical stress, panics a little bit, and sends an urgent signal to the osteoblast saying like, hey, we need to fortify this structure immediately or we're going to break next time. It forces the body to lay down denser bone tissue, but, you can't trigger that with a comfortable effort.
Which explains the specific dosage the research gives us. The data says 3 sessions per week is the evidence-based sweet spot. 2 sessions maintain what you have, but 3 sessions actually build. What is happening in the body on those 3 days versus just doing it, say, occasionally?
Well, it comes down to the frequency of the stimulus. When you lift heavy, you elevate muscle protein synthesis and bone remodeling for roughly 48 to 72 hours. If you only lift once or twice a week, your body builds for a couple of days and then returns to baseline. It basically says, well, that was a weird, isolated event, no need to permanently change our architecture.
Right.
But when you hit that 3-day-a-week cadence, you are persistently reminding your physiology that it is required to be strong in order to survive its environment.
Okay, so the frequency matters,
Yeah.
but the specific movements matter even more. The research highlights the big 6 compound movements as the absolute drivers of bone density changes at the most vulnerable sites in the female body. We're talking about the squat, the leg press, the lat pull down, the bench press, the seated row, and hip extension exercises.
Yes, the big 6.
Why these specific movements? Why can't I just do a bunch of bicep curls and calf raises?
Because bicep curls and calf raises are isolation exercises. They only load small, specific joints.
Yeah.
The big 6 are multi-joint structural exercises. They involve massive muscle groups pulling forcefully on the skeleton.
Oh, I see.
Remember Wolff's Law. That mechanical deformation needs to happen at the sites that are actually at risk for osteoporotic fractures later in life.
Right.
When you do a heavy squat or a leg press, you are directly loading the femoral neck. That's the top of the thigh bone right where it meets the pelvis.
Which is notorious for fractures.
Prime real estate for severe fractures, yeah. When you do a seated row or a lat pull down, those massive back muscles are literally pulling against your spinal vertebrae, which stimulates the spine to become denser. The bench press loads the wrists and the shoulder girdle. You are basically building armor exactly where the female body naturally becomes the most vulnerable.
Let's talk about how heavy this armor needs to be, because here's where the data gets really interesting. The evidence points to working sets of 6 to 12 reps at a moderate to high intensity. And by that, the data means 70 to 85% of your 1-rep max effort. For bone density, the sheer intensity of the load matters so much more than doing endless volume with a lighter weight.
This is perhaps the hardest mental hurdle for many women to cross. I mean, doing 30 reps with a 3-pound dumbbell might make your muscles burn, sure, but it does absolutely nothing for your bone density.
Nothing at all.
Basically nothing. The physical load just isn't heavy enough to cause that necessary deformation we talked about. The bone essentially says, I don't need to get structurally stronger to handle this, I just need better endurance. To build bone and dense muscle, you need to lift a weight that makes those last 2 or 3 reps in a set of 10 feel genuinely, profoundly difficult. Your nervous system has to feel challenged.
Okay, I have to push back here. I hear 70 to 85% of max effort, and I immediately think of getting bulky or getting hurt. How does a female athlete ease into that safely?
I get it. That's a completely understandable fear, given the images we see on social media, but it fundamentally misunderstands the intentionality required to actually get bulky. The female powerlifters or bodybuilders you see are eating in massive, purposeful caloric surpluses, and their training volume, like the sheer number of sets and reps, is astronomical.
Right, they're working specifically for that size.
Exactly. When a typical woman goes to the gym 3 times a week and lifts at 85% of her max for 6 to 12 reps, she just doesn't have the testosterone or the caloric excess to build huge, puffy muscle bellies. What she builds is myofibrillar hypertrophy.
Myofibrillar hypertrophy. Break that down for me.
Sure. So muscle growth happens in two main ways. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy increases the fluid and energy stores in the muscle, making it look bigger and puffier. That's what bodybuilders chase.
Okay.
Myofibrillar hypertrophy increases the actual contractile fibers of the muscle. So the muscle becomes denser, harder, and significantly stronger without necessarily getting much larger in circumference. You become compact and powerful. You are essentially upgrading the engine of a car without changing the size of the hood.
Oh, I love that. Upgrading the engine without changing the hood.
Yeah.
But let's talk about safety, because throwing a heavy barbell on your back, if you've never done it before, sounds like a recipe for a slip disc.
Well, safety is paramount, and heavy is highly relative. If you are a beginner, 85% of your max might just be your body weight, or an empty 45-pound barbell. Easing in means mastering the movement pattern with very light weights first.
So form first, always.
Always. You have to build the neurological pathways. Your brain needs to learn how to fire the right muscle fibers in the right sequence. Once the movement looks and feels perfect, then you gradually increase the load over weeks and months. You don't walk in on day one and try to lift a car. You build the scaffolding, and then you add the bricks.
Now let's talk about a huge myth that the 2024 McConan Review busts wide open: the interference effect. For years, we were told that if you lift weights and do cardio, the endurance training cancels out your strength gains. The cardio just eats the muscle.
The interference effect is largely a myth for women at moderate training volumes. This is a classic textbook example of male data being superimposed on women.
Here we go again.
Right. In men, the molecular signaling pathways for endurance and strength clash quite aggressively. But women's bodies actually handle concurrent training, doing both strength and endurance highly effectively.
Why is that? Why do women handle it better?
Because of estrogen. Estrogen is inherently muscle-sparing. It promotes fat oxidation, meaning women naturally burn more fat for fuel during exercise, which spares the glycogen stored in the muscles.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so because the muscle isn't as depleted, the body doesn't panic and break down muscle tissue to find energy. You do not have to choose between being strong and having great endurance. Your physiology is built to do both.
So how do we adapt this strength foundation across female athlete or life stages? Because the blueprint changes as hormones change, right? Let's start with the reproductive years.
During your reproductive years, your hormones are cycling, but generally your estrogen and progesterone are providing a great supportive anabolic environment. Standard progressive overload works incredibly well here.
So just gradually adding weight over time.
Exactly. You track your lifts, and every week or two, you try to add a little bit of weight or squeeze out one more rep. Your body has the hormonal support to recover from that stress and build new tissue seamlessly.
And the perimenopause.
Right. The transition phase. And this is the most critical shift. During perimenopause, as estrogen starts to fluctuate wildly and overall levels decline, you actually lose some of your natural ability to regenerate muscle stem cells.
Wait, I need to pause you there. What do you mean lose the ability? The research mentions a drop in stem cell regeneration. How big of a drop are we talking about?
Well, muscle biopsies from perimenopausal women show that this regenerative capacity can drop by 30 to 60%.
60%. No wonder women in their 40s feel like they hit an absolute wall. Does the muscle just start dying?
It doesn't die, no, but it becomes incredibly resistant to growth. And this is exactly why the traditional advice, oh, you're getting older, you should switch to lighter weights and water aerobics, is so destructive.
Right.
This is absolutely not the time to back off. Because the internal hormonal signal estrogen is fading, you have to replace it with an external mechanical signal. Heavy compound lifts become your lifeline. You have to scream at your muscles with heavy weight to force them to utilize the remaining stem cell capacity. If you just whisper at them with light weights, they simply won't respond anymore.
And moving into postmenopause.
For postmenopausal women, resistance training 3 times per week with those compound movements is, without exaggeration, the anchor of your entire well-being. The hormonal volatility is gone, estrogen is consistently low, and you are entirely reliant on the mechanical stress of lifting to preserve muscle mass, bone density, and metabolic health. It is the single most important lifestyle tool you have.
So what does this actually look like for someone listening right now?
Let me break that down. First, in plain terms, heavy lifting protects your bones and your metabolism as your hormones change.
Simple enough.
Second, you need to recognize if you're at risk here. If your current routine is just cardio and light dumbbells, you are leaving your bone density totally unprotected.
Yep.
Third, the concrete action you need to take is adding 3 heavy sessions a week, focusing on those 6 core compound lifts we discussed. And finally, What you must avoid is sticking to those comfortable 5-pound weights for high reps. It might feel like work, but it's fundamentally not signaling your bones to grow.
That makes perfect sense. So we've established that for strength, high intensity and heavy loads are the absolute key. We want to be lifting heavy. But when it comes to cardio, high intensity operates under a completely different set of rules for women. Let's talk about HIIT, high-intensity interval training, and why standard protocols often completely fail female athletes.
This is one of the most widespread systemic issues in the fitness industry today. Most HIIT protocols, the ones you see in boutique fitness classes, popular apps, or standard gym boot camps, they were designed using male subjects, tested on male biochemistry, and based on male recovery patterns.
And as we know, women are not small men. We have to bring in Dr. Stacy Sims's foundational work here. She points out a fascinating physiological difference deep inside the muscle tissue. True high-intensity work requires type 2 fibers, which are like a drag racer blowing through rocket fuel.
That is exactly how it works. Because women have more of those type I hybrid car fibers, they are highly efficient at using oxygen to generate fuel. This gives women a superpower when it comes to endurance. You have superior fatigue resistance at submaximal steady-state efforts.
Oh, absolutely.
A female athlete can pace a marathon or go for a long, steady bike ride and recover relatively quickly because her muscles are literally built for efficient oxidation.
But in the high-intensity domain, the hormonal cause is vastly different for women. When a woman pushes into that true maximum heart rate zone, the zone where you can't breathe, let alone talk, her body reacts differently to the stress.
Right. Is a massive systemic stressor. When you sprint all out, your brain perceives that as a life or death threat. It immediately spikes cortisol, your primary stress hormone, to mobilize glucose so you can survive the effort.
Okay, that makes sense.
In men, testosterone helps blunt some of that catabolic tissue breakdown effect of cortisol. The testosterone acts as a buffer. Women have much less testosterone. So when a female athlete does high-intensity intervals day after day, doing these 45-minute boot camps all week, she ends up in a chronic high cortisol state.
And chronic cortisol is terrible. Her body essentially thinks she's constantly running from a tiger day in and day out. What does that do to the body over time?
It creates metabolic chaos. Chronic cortisol breaks down muscle tissue for fast energy. It instructs the body to store fat, specifically around the midsection, as a survival mechanism. It disrupts sleep architecture, and it suppresses thyroid function. So this woman is working incredibly hard, feeling exhausted, and actually gaining body fat while losing muscle.
Which leads to the golden rule from Dr. Sim's research. Should be done no more than twice per week, and it should be capped at 30 minutes maximum per session. And here's the kicker. That 30 minutes includes your warm-up and your cool-down. That leaves maybe 15 minutes of actual hard work.
It sounds like a fraction of what most people are doing, but that's the point. If you are actually doing true high intensity, meaning you are breathless, your muscles are burning, you literally cannot speak a single word. You shouldn't be physically able to do it for 45 minutes anyway.
Very true.
If you are surviving a 45-minute, you aren't actually just doing moderate intensity cardio with brief moments of getting slightly more tired.
And that moderate intensity zone, the middle ground where you're working hard but not maxing out, is exactly what we want to be careful with as our hormones change. Let's look at the life stage modifications for HIIT. During the reproductive years, how should a woman approach this?
During the reproductive years, you want to sync your HIIT with your menstrual cycle to maximize adaptation and minimize stress. When your hormones, estrogen and progesterone, are low, which is the follicular phase right after your period starts, your body is incredibly resilient.
So that's the time to push.
Yes, it's primed to handle stress, access carbohydrates for fast energy, and recover quickly. That's when you push hard with HIIT. But when hormones are high in the luteal phase, the week before your period, your core temperature is elevated, your blood plasma volume drops, and recovery is severely compromised. That is when you back off the high intensity. In perimenopause, the modification is to shift from all-out, maximal efforts to controlled high-intensity intervals. Your goal here is to get a metabolic stimulus, to elevate the heart rate without triggering a massive cortisol spike.
Because the baseline is already off.
Right. Because in perimenopause, due to the fluctuating estrogen, your baseline cortisol is often already elevated, and your nervous system is hypersensitive to stress. A massive cortisol spike will ruin your sleep, tank your mood, and halt your recovery during a stage where you are already feeling vulnerable.
And finally, post-menopause. The playbook changes completely again.
It does. Post-menopause, you want to switch to SIT sprint interval training. These are brief 10 to 30-second all-out absolute maximum efforts followed by full, prolonged recovery. Think sprinting on a bike as hard as humanly possible for 20 seconds and then pedaling slowly for 2 minutes. It is incredibly brief but incredibly intense.
Why the shift to SIT? What is the biological mechanism there?
Well, because the postmenopausal drop in estrogen accelerates the loss of fast-twitch muscle fibers. Those type 2 fibers responsible for power, speed, and balance. If you don't use them, the body aggressively prunes them.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. SIT acts as a powerful, targeted neurological tool. The explosive nature of the sprint forces the brain to recruit every single fast-twitch fiber available, maintaining that crucial neuromuscular connection. It keeps your reflexes sharp and your power output high.
So HIT for women is like a surgical scalpel, not a sledgehammer. You use it precisely, get the job done, and put it away immediately. More is definitely not better.
I love that visual. If you use a surgical scalpel like a sledgehammer, you don't fix the patient, you just cause massive, unnecessary trauma.
So what does this actually look like for someone listening right now?
Okay, to put it in plain terms, doing too much HIIT spikes your stress hormones and halts your progress. You need to recognize that this is happening. If a HIIT session leaves you wiped out, lethargic, or brain fogged for 2 days, that is a hormonal recovery mismatch, not a sign of physical weakness.
Important distinction.
The concrete action you need to take is limiting your true HIIT to twice a week and keeping the total session time, including your warm-up and cool-down, to 30 minutes max. And what you must avoid is long, chronic cardio at a moderate intensity. Those are junk miles. They drive up your cortisol without giving you the benefits of true high-intensity work, nor do they offer the deep aerobic cellular benefits of true, easy, low-intensity Zone 2 training.
Okay, so we've established the puzzle pieces. We need heavy lifting 3 times a week, and we need very precise, limited HIIT no more than twice a week. Yep. But how do we actually fit them into a single 7-day week without burning out? This is where concurrent training protocols come in.
Right. This is the architecture of your training week. We have great data here from Dr. Ritva Mikkonen and Dr. Anthony Hackney's 2024 systematic review, which is a fantastic paper because it specifically looked at healthy adult female populations. Do you know how rare it is to have a robust systematic review on concurrent training that doesn't just rely on male college students? It's a goldmine.
The review reiterates what we touched on earlier. Women can train both strength and endurance effectively. But the magic, the biological adaptation, is entirely in the sequencing. Let's break down exactly what happens at a cellular level when we exercise.
When you ask a muscle to lift a heavy weight, the mechanical tension sends a specific cellular signal, primarily through a molecular pathway called mTOR.
MPO.
Yes, and mTOR is like the master builder. It gets the signal and says, okay, we need to synthesize protein and build more muscle mass immediately. When you ask a muscle to run or cycle for an hour, it sends a completely different signal through a pathway called AMPK. AMPK is like the cellular accountant.
The accountant, okay.
It senses that energy is being depleted and says, we need to build more mitochondria and improve our endurance efficiency.
So what happens if I do a heavy leg day and then immediately go run for an hour? Do the builder and the accountant get along?
They absolutely do not. AMPK actually inhibits mTOR. If you send both signals at the exact same time, the endurance signal, the accountant trying to save energy, will actively shut down the builder trying to synthesize muscle. They compete for resources, and usually the strength adaptation loses out.
So the general rule for women is to do strength before endurance if you are training them on the same day. Or, ideally, keep them on completely separate days.
Yes. If your schedule forces you to double up, lift heavy first. When your nervous system is fresh, hit the weights, stimulate that mTOR builder pathway, and then do your cardio afterward. But for serious athletes, or if you're doing a highly intense strength session and a highly intense cardio session, you need to separate those by at least 24 hours.
You give the body time.
Exactly. The mTOR signal takes time to process. You have to give those cellular adaptation signals time to clear the biological traffic jams so they don't clash.
Let's view this through the lens of life stages and energy availability, because your ability to recover from this dual demand schedule changes dramatically.
Oh, absolutely. As a woman moves from her reproductive years into perimenopause and post-menopause, she essentially has to bake in more dedicated recovery time. Your physiological resilience to back-to-back stressors changes because your hormone profile isn't buffering the stress the way it used to.
Right.
You might have been able to do a heavy leg day and an intense track workout on the same day at 25 without blinking, but at 48, your hormonal profile demands that you separate those efforts, or you will simply stop adapting.
And we can't talk about concurrent training without bringing up low energy availability, or LEA. Concurrent training drastically increases your daily caloric demand. You're asking your body to build muscle and build mitochondria in the same week.
And this is the silent killer of female athletic progress. Underfueling masks itself as poor recovery, lingering soreness, poor sleep, or a sudden frustrating performance plateau. Your body operates on a metabolic triage system. If you do all this training but you don't eat enough calories, your body simply does not have the raw, energetic materials to adapt to both the strength and the endurance stimuli. It triages the available energy just to keep your vital organs functioning, your brain working, and your heart beating. To save energy, it actively shuts down muscle repair, bone turnover, and hormonal health.
I'm listening to this and trying to perfectly schedule the builder, the accountant, the 24-hour windows. It sounds incredibly stressful. The mental load of managing this is high.
We have to separate optimization from execution. Consistency always beats perfect sequencing. If the only way you can get your workout done is cardio first, do it. Moving your body is always better than doing nothing.
That's a relief to hear.
But you should note that smart scheduling optimizes your biological return on investment. If you are training consistently for months but you are not seeing the strength gains you expect, or you feel constantly fatigued, the sequencing and the fueling are the first two variables you should adjust. Don't train harder, arrange the training smarter.
So what does this actually look like for someone listening right now?
In plain terms, you absolutely can do cardio and strength in the same week, but you shouldn't do them back to back if they are both highly intense. You need to recognize the warning signs. If you aren't seeing strength gains despite consistently lifting heavy, your cardio might be scheduled too close to your lifting sessions, or you simply aren't eating enough calories to support both.
Right.
The concrete action here is to look at your calendar and explicitly schedule your strength before your cardio if you are forced to do them on the same day. And what you must avoid is doing a heavy, taxing leg day immediately followed by a high-intensity track sprint session. The cellular signals will just cancel each other out.
That structural advice is so empowering. But of course, scheduling your week perfectly means absolutely nothing if you end up sidelined by an injury. And for women, injury risk is uniquely tied to hormonal fluctuations, which is the window most athletes completely fail to protect.
It's true. We touched on this briefly in our first deep dive when we discussed how estrogen levels affect ligament laxity. For example, right around ovulation, when estrogen naturally surges, ligaments like the ACL become slightly more lax. Their tensile strength changes, increasing injury risk during cutting or jumping movements if your neuromuscular system isn't prepared. But the new research paints an even broader, more systemic picture of how hormones impact overall joint health.
The 2025 PLOS One study by McConch et al. Is mind-blowing here. They surveyed 187 female endurance athletes. These are fit, highly active women who are running, cycling, swimming regularly, and they found that a staggering 63% report joint and muscular discomfort. And it wasn't just a minor annoyance. These symptoms significantly hampered their ability to train.
What is truly crucial about that study is who was hurting the most. It wasn't the oldest women, the post-menopausal group, who had the highest symptom burden. It was the women in perimenopause, the chaotic transition phase.
Which feels totally counterintuitive. You'd think the older you get, the more your joints hurt.
Yeah.
Why is perimenopause the epicenter of joint pain?
It comes back to the erratic nature of the hormones. Estrogen is naturally anti-inflammatory, and it helps regulate fluid dynamics within the joint capsule. During perimenopause, your estrogen levels aren't just declining, they are swinging wildly. One day they are sky high, the next day they crash.
Just a roller coaster.
Yeah. These wild fluctuations create massive systemic inflammation. Tendons become stiffer, and the fluid that lubricates the joints changes in viscosity.
So I have to ask, because I hear this all the time from women in their 40s, is joint pain during perimenopause just a sign of getting older, or is it actually a physiological hormonal shift?
It is absolutely a physiological hormonal shift, not just the passage of time. It is a chemical reality, not a moral failing of aging. When estrogen drops erratically, collagen synthesis, the building blocks of your tendons and ligaments, is impaired. Your tendons literally lose their elastic recoil. Because it is a chemical biological process, we can manage it. We can combat it with targeted recovery and warm-up protocols.
To combat this, Dr. Stacy Sims developed the 36-hour recovery window protocol specifically to prevent these soft tissue injuries. Let's walk through how to apply this across the life stages to this during the reproductive years.
During your reproductive years, the focus is on the luteal phase, the week or so before your period. Remember, during this time, your core temperature is higher, your blood plasma volume is lower, and your systemic recovery is naturally slower.
Right.
The modification here is to add extra dedicated dynamic warm-ups during this phase. Your joints are literally less lubricated. You need to spend more time physically warming the tissue and priming the nervous system before loading it with heavy weights or fast sprints.
And during perimenopause, when that symptom burden is at its absolute highest.
This is where Dr. Sims's 36-hour recovery window becomes vital. Instead of training hard every 24 hours, you institute a 36-hour gap between intense sessions. For example, you might do a heavy lift on Monday morning, you might do a sprint session on Tuesday morning. But then you take 36 hours of active recovery, meaning your next hard, demanding session isn't until Wednesday evening or Thursday morning.
Why 36 hours? What is happening in that extra 12 hours?
It gives the soft tissue, the tendons and ligaments, which have very poor blood supply compared to muscles, the extended time it needs to clear inflammation and repair micro tears. Because your hormones aren't managing the inflammation efficiently, you have to manage it with time.
And post-menopause. The fluctuations stop. So what is the strategy there?
Post-menopause, the focus shifts to the nervous system. Estrogen plays a huge role in neuromuscular control, how quickly and efficiently your brain talks to your joints to tell them to stabilize when you step off a curb or catch a heavy barbell.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when estrogen flatlines post-menopause, that communication can get slightly delayed, so the emphasis must shift heavily toward proprioception and balance work. You have to actively train the nervous system to stabilize the joints before you run or lift.
So what does this actually look like for someone listening right now?
Simply put, hormones change how your joints and ligaments respond to physical stress. You have to recognize the signals your body is sending. If you are feeling new, unusual joint stiffness or lingering soreness that feels deep in the connective tissue, not just typical muscle fatigue, that is a hormonal soft tissue issue.
Right.
The concrete action you need to take is implementing a dynamic neuromuscular warm-up before every single session. No more walking into the gym, doing a few arm circles, and going straight to the heavy barbell. And what you must avoid is skipping warm-ups, and absolutely avoid doing maximum plyometric or cutting efforts, like box jumps or agility drills, without extensive neurological preparation.
Excellent. Now, you cannot repair those joints, you cannot clear that inflammation, you cannot build that muscle, and you certainly cannot recover from that precise session if you don't give the body the raw materials it needs. Let's dive into nutrition that supports training, where the absolute golden rule is energy first, everything else second.
The 2026 Walter et al. Review and the 2025 Liu et al. Meta-analysis make this undeniably mathematically clear. Energy availability is the foundation of the house. No perfectly timed supplement, no fancy magnesium powder, no high-tech recovery boots can fix a calorie deficit that is too deep.
Because, as we discussed with the metabolic triage, if your body doesn't have enough calories, it simply shuts down non-essential functions like muscle repair and bone turnover. But let's be realistic here. Many women are training because they want to change their body composition. What if fat loss is the goal? The 2026 German Sport University Review gave us a very specific mathematical ceiling for female athletes.
Yes, and this is crucial data. They found that if you are trying to lose body fat while maintaining your training, a deficit of 250 to 750 calories per day is the absolute maximum deficit a female body can sustain to preserve lean mass while strength training. If you cut more aggressively than that 750 calorie ceiling, the body perceives starvation. It will hold on to body fat as a survival mechanism, and it will actively cannibalize your own muscle tissue to find the energy it needs to sustain your training. You will ruin your bone density, you will crash your metabolism, and you will end up with a higher body fat percentage in the long run because you've destroyed the metabolically active muscle tissue.
And within those calories, whatever your target is, protein is the undisputed king. Dr. Sim's research shows that women in heavy training need 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily. That is significantly higher than the standard RDA, and the timing is hyper-specific.
The post-workout window is uniquely crucial for women. You need 35 to 40 grams of high-quality protein within 30 to 45 minutes of finishing your training.
Why is the window so short for women compared to men? I've heard men can drink a protein shake 2 hours later and be fine.
Women's bodies return to baseline metabolism much faster than men's after exercise. A man's body might stay in an elevated receptive state for hours. A woman's body rapidly tries to downregulate and return to homeostasis.
Interesting.
So you have a very short, specific window to flip the biological switch from breaking down muscle to building it back up. If you miss that 45-minute window, you miss the peak opportunity for muscle protein synthesis.
What about micronutrients? Are there specific vitamins or minerals that become non-negotiable for female athletes?
Calcium and vitamin D are paramount, especially given everything we've discussed about bone density. The evidence shows that 800 milligrams of calcium daily is the clinical threshold required to protect bone mineral density, alongside adequate vitamin D to actually absorb that calcium in the gut.
Right.
If you are training hard, but you are below that calcium threshold, your body will literally pull calcium out of your bones to buffer the acidity in your blood caused by intense exercise. You risk bone loss regardless of how perfectly you are strength training.
How do female athletes tweak this fueling strategy across the life stages?
During your reproductive years and perimenopause, the mantra is fuel for the work. That means carbohydrates before you train to provide accessible energy, and protein immediately after to repair. You have to stoke the fire before you demand heat.
And post-menopause. There's a fascinating biological shift here called anabolic resistance. Break down what that means for our listeners.
Anabolic resistance means that as we age, the muscle tissue becomes somewhat deaf to the signal of protein. Think of it like hearing loss for your muscles. In your 20s, you could eat 20 grams of protein and the muscle would hear the signal loudly and start building. Post-menopause, because you lack estrogen to sensitize the pathway, 20 grams is just a whisper. The muscle doesn't hear it. To trigger muscle protein synthesis, you need a much louder signal, which means a higher absolute dose of protein, specifically the amino acid leucine, at each meal. So your overall protein needs actually go up. Calcium becomes even more critical, and any attempt at caloric restriction must be incredibly moderate because your body is already fighting an uphill battle to hold on to lean mass.
I have to ask the elephant in the room question here. We hear so much about fasting and fasted cardio. How does that fit into this framework?
I will be very blunt. Fasted training is a massive, unnecessary stressor that female physiology generally does not respond well to, especially during perimenopause.
It's everywhere right now, though.
It is, but remember what we said about estrogen helping to control cortisol? When estrogen is fluctuating or low, cortisol is highly reactive. Waking up, having 0 calories in your system, and doing a hard workout tells your female brain that you are starving, you are in danger, and you need to flee. It drives cortisol through the roof.
And as we established, high cortisol tells the body to store fat, not burn it.
Exactly. Fasted training promotes fat storage around the midsection and eats away at lean muscle. It is counterproductive to everything a female athlete is trying to achieve. Women need to eat before they train. Even half a banana or a small piece of toast changes the hormonal signaling from starvation to fueled.
So what does this actually look like for someone listening right now?
In plain terms, you have to eat to support your training, and protein is your most important macronutrient. You need to recognize the symptoms of underfueling. If you are constantly exhausted, irritable, struggling with sleep, or your performance has flatlined for weeks, you are likely underfueling, not overtraining.
Okay.
Your concrete action is to ensure you eat 35 to 40 grams of protein within 45 minutes of finishing your workout every single time. And what you must avoid is aggressive caloric cutting and fasted workouts during heavy training blocks. They will backfire spectacularly.
So where does something like FitPA fit into all of this, especially when training needs to change depending on where you are hormonally?
The training shifts we've talked about, heavier lifting in perimenopause, shorter HI sessions, longer recovery windows, all create signals that show up in your wearable data, like HRV changes, elevated resting heart rate, and altered sleep patterns. FitPA's AI coach reads those physiological signals in real time and adapts your training load accordingly, so your plan responds to your actual biology even when you haven't yet connected the dots.
That real-time adjustment is a game changer. Having a system that actually reads the nuances of female physiology instead of just spitting out a generic male algorithm. Before you go, here's your cheat sheet for this week.
Sounds good.
For strength, pick your 3 days this week to lift heavy and focus on those 6 compound movements. For HIIT, cap your high-intensity session at 30 minutes and adjust the effort based on your cycle or menopausal stage. For concurrent training, look at your calendar and make sure your heavy lifting and intense cardio are separated by at least 24 hours.
Fair.
For injury prevention, commit to a dynamic 5-minute warm-up before your next run or lift. And for nutrition, plan your post-workout protein snack. We're talking 35 to 40 grams before you start your workout, so it's ready the minute you finish.
If we step back and connect all of this biology, all of this scheduling and fueling to the bigger picture, here is the paradigm shift I want everyone to take away. For too long, we viewed the female body as a machine that breaks down as hormones change. But your body isn't a machine, it's an ecosystem. And an ecosystem doesn't break, it adapts. When you change the environment with the right training and the right fuel, your body is built to thrive at every single stage of life.
It is an ecosystem built to be strong, adaptable, and resilient. Thank you so much for exploring this with us. We will see you on the next deep dive. Female athlete. Women. And how does that change depending on where you are hormonally?
That is, well, that's exactly the bridge we need to cross today. Because we're taking all that theory, all the complex endocrinology and that underlying biology we've unpacked over this series, and we're translating it directly to the gym floor, the track, and, the kitchen. Because the days of just guessing and hoping for the best are over.
And honestly, it's about time. Because for decades, the fitness industry treated women like small men with the exact same biology. Trying to run a female athlete's body on a male training protocol is like trying to run iOS software on an Android phone. It might sort of work for a while, but eventually the system crashes.
Oh, wow. That is the perfect way to visualize it. Because the operating systems are fundamentally, on a cellular level, they're different.
Right.
The hormonal environment that dictates how you recover from a workout, how you synthesize new muscle tissue, or even how you metabolize systemic stress, it's entirely unique to female physiology.
Totally.
When you apply male data, which, assumes this stable daily infusion of testosterone, to a female body that runs on these fluctuating cycles of estrogen and progesterone, the resulting crash isn't just a plateau in performance.
It's way worse than that.
Yeah, it manifests as chronic injury, metabolic slowing, and just, severe burnout.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. Today's goal is pure execution. We are taking a massive stack of incredible female-specific sports science sources,
Good stuff.
including brand new systematic reviews from 2024 and 2026, major research out of the German Sport University Cologne, and the groundbreaking work of experts like Dr. Stacy Sims, Dr. Ritva McConan, and Dr. Anthony Hackney. We are taking all of that and turning it into a practical, actionable blueprint for you, tailored to whatever hormonal stage you're in right now.
Right, because, you shouldn't need a PhD in endocrinology or exercise physiology just to figure out how to structure your training week. The science is complex, sure, but the application needs to be clear, it needs to be adaptive, and it needs to be empowering.
Okay, let's unpack this. Since we are moving away from that small men paradigm, we really have to start with the most misunderstood pillar of female fitness, which is strength training.
Oh, absolutely.
For so long, the message to women was basically, grab the pink dumbbells, do 20 reps so you get toned, but not bulky, and then spend 45 minutes on the elliptical.
Ugh, the pink dumbbells, right.
But looking at the 2026 Walter Edel systematic review from the German Sport University Cologne, which look exclusively at postmenopausal women, by the way, and the 2024 McConan systematic review looking at healthy adult females, the consensus is loud and clear. Strength training is absolute medicine. It is not an optional add-on.
It really is the non-negotiable foundation of the entire system. And when we use the word medicine, we aren't using it as a cute metaphor.
No.
We mean it in a very literal, measurable, physiological sense. Strength training consistently improves body composition, muscle strength, and bone mineral density in women across all menopausal stages.
It's incredible.
It's basically the single most effective intervention we have to counteract the natural physiological declines that happen as we age, particularly as estrogen drops.
So let's dig into that estrogen connection for a second, because I think a lot of people just view estrogen as like the reproductive hormone. What is it actually doing in the muscles and bones?
That's a huge misconception, actually. Estrogen is heavily involved in muscle stem cell activation and bone maintenance. So in your bones, there is this constant remodeling process happening.
Okay.
You have cells called osteoclasts that break down old bone and cells called osteoblasts that build new bone.
Got it. Osteoclasts crash, osteoblasts build.
Exactly. When you have robust estrogen levels, Estrogen acts like a supervisor, keeping the osteoclasts in check so they don't break down too much bone. But as estrogen declines, especially in perimenopause and postmenopause, that supervisor basically leaves the building.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the osteoclasts start working overtime, breaking down bone faster than your body can rebuild it. So your natural protective shield is just gone.
So if the chemical supervisor is gone, we basically have to find a mechanical way to tell the bones to stay strong.
Precisely. Heavy resistance training essentially steps in to replace that shield through a mechanism called Wolff's Law.
Wolff's Law.
Yeah. Wolff's Law basically states that bone in a healthy person will adapt to the loads under which it is placed. If you put a heavy barbell on your back, that physical stress causes microscopic bending in the bone.
Wait, actual bending?
Yes, very microscopic, but yes. The bone tissue senses that mechanical stress, panics a little bit, and sends an urgent signal to the osteoblast saying like, hey, we need to fortify this structure immediately or we're going to break next time. It forces the body to lay down denser bone tissue, but, you can't trigger that with a comfortable effort.
Which explains the specific dosage the research gives us. The data says 3 sessions per week is the evidence-based sweet spot. 2 sessions maintain what you have, but 3 sessions actually build. What is happening in the body on those 3 days versus just doing it, say, occasionally?
Well, it comes down to the frequency of the stimulus. When you lift heavy, you elevate muscle protein synthesis and bone remodeling for roughly 48 to 72 hours. If you only lift once or twice a week, your body builds for a couple of days and then returns to baseline. It basically says, well, that was a weird, isolated event, no need to permanently change our architecture.
Right.
But when you hit that 3-day-a-week cadence, you are persistently reminding your physiology that it is required to be strong in order to survive its environment.
Okay, so the frequency matters,
Yeah.
but the specific movements matter even more. The research highlights the big 6 compound movements as the absolute drivers of bone density changes at the most vulnerable sites in the female body. We're talking about the squat, the leg press, the lat pull down, the bench press, the seated row, and hip extension exercises.
Yes, the big 6.
Why these specific movements? Why can't I just do a bunch of bicep curls and calf raises?
Because bicep curls and calf raises are isolation exercises. They only load small, specific joints.
Yeah.
The big 6 are multi-joint structural exercises. They involve massive muscle groups pulling forcefully on the skeleton.
Oh, I see.
Remember Wolff's Law. That mechanical deformation needs to happen at the sites that are actually at risk for osteoporotic fractures later in life.
Right.